Breaking right now at 8:55, another one of former President Donald Trump's co-defendants, attorney Kenneth Chesebro, has just turned himself in at the Fulton County Jail.
Chesebro worked with Georgia Republicans in the weeks after the November 2020 election at the direction of Donald Trump's campaign. He worked on the coordination and execution of a plan to have 16 Georgia Republicans sign a certificate declaring falsely that Trump won and declaring themselves the state's duly elected and qualified electors.
Now, moments before that, we got word that Georgia attorney Ray Smith also just turned himself in. Smith was involved in multiple lawsuits challenging the results of the 2020 election in Georgia.
This follows the surrenders overnight of David Schaefer and Kathy Latham. Schaefer is the former chair of the Georgia Republican Party. He oversaw that meeting of the 16 GOP electors at the state capitol. Latham is accused of being a fake elector, and according to the indictment, she took part in an alleged data breach of election information in Coffee County.
Now, former Trump lawyer John Eastman and bail bondsman Scott Hall were the first of the 19 defendants to surrender at the Fulton County Jail yesterday. Eastman is accused of coming up with the idea to overturn the election. Hall is accused of taking voting information from Coffee County.
Trump is expected to turn himself in tomorrow. His bond is set at $200,000. Stay with Atlanta News First on air and online as we prepare for that to happen. We will break in and we will send you updates. We will have comprehensive coverage as well today at noon.